profile of the voluntary sector, impressing upon all of us the importance of the voluntary and community sector as a partner and professionalising the sector. So we'll miss you, Jane. I know it's your last day absolutely at MVA tomorrow, and that you've received the huge amount of well wishes that you absolutely deserve. And here's one more from all of us at the Health and Wellbeing Board. So we'll miss you. But we know you've left a great legacy, MVA. Yes, would you like to say a few?
Can I?
Thank you, Jane. That's great news, and welcome, Claire, to that very demanding post. But I'm pleased that you're here. And just for our records, Claire, will it be you who attends here for the time being? That's great. Thank you very much. Okay, so with that, very good start to the meeting, and I'm sure Jane's contributions as we go on. We've got quite a few visitors today and quite a few apologies as well. So I've got apologies from Jonathan Wade at Medway Foundation Trust, but I'm very pleased to say that Matt Capper has come in his place. We've got apologies from Paul Bentley and Ed Waller, but Malty is here for the Integrated Care Board, and we've got apologies from Martin Riley at MCH, and apologies from Councillor Curry, who we had a clash and agreed that he wouldn't come today, even though we're seeing the climate action plan, but Simon's worked on that and I'm okay with that. And from Tracy Coombs, late today, she's got a really bad tooth that was troubling her at our lovely Make a Difference Awards yesterday, where I'm very pleased to say for the People Directorate, Kelly Cogger was nominated for the special James Williams Award. So congratulations from that Kelly, and it was lovely to see you as a recipient and a fairly new assistant director of all of the staff's appreciation. So had lots of good things to say about each other. And with our Make a Difference Awards, for those of you that don't know about them, that's Medway Council's opportunity to appreciate each other, to appreciate the way that we work across the whole of the council, and to identify those people who really are making a difference to the public and to our partners every day. And Kelly, if you like, got that very special award after singing Islands in the Stream with Jackie. So that's the way things go. It was a very nice afternoon, and they're going to paint that for Christmas and, do a double as far as karaoke. And finally, Councillor Tijan is here for Councillor Lawrence. So thank you very much for substituting today. Okay. So we'll move to the agenda, and, actually we've got another apology from Caroline Rickard from the LMC, and I don't think anybody has substituted. So that's a shame, but they're very good attenders. Any other apologies before I move to the minutes? No, everybody else is here. And so we welcome colleagues from the police today, colleagues from the Forward Trust, helping to enrich our debate and discussions with some of the important topics. Thank you. Okay, so if I turn to the record of the meeting, which has gone off my computer screen. Okay, so is everybody happy? I'm happy, having read the minutes of the last meeting. Our theme was reducing poverty and inequality. We had homelessness prevention, a very full debate there. Yes. Oh, Councillor Jones, sorry. Have you got a comment on the minutes?
No, I was just going to say agreed, Chair, but I was waiting for you to finish what you were
I
saying.
see. Before I'd finished speaking. Well, that's very good. Thank you, Mark. I'm very, very happy about that. It gives me huge confidence. So we looked at improving outcomes for children in care. Again, a very full report. An interesting report from secondary mental health service users in paid employment and keeping them there. Very, very topical. We had a big debate about young people not in education and employment, and I'm pleased, working with our colleagues in education, we're going to have a round table about that, because I'm afraid we've seen an unusual rise in Medway that's out of kilter with the rest of the country, but we decided to wait to have the meeting until after we'd got everybody into their secondary places and college places before we made a judgment about whether anything had improved this year, if there's any learning that we can do. So we're hoping that we'll be able to have that meeting in late September or early October, but definitely before the next Health and Wellbeing Board in November. And then we looked at the work programme. So is everybody happy that I signed the record of the meeting as a true record? Thank you, Mark Jones. Yeah, he's nodding there, having already agreed them before we got to the item. So that was a good thing. Okay, so our theme, as regular attenders will know, but just for the avoidance of doubt, we're taking themes and elements of our health and wellbeing strategy and making sure that things are where we want them to be, and by having a look together at this meeting, if they are not, putting in ideas and actions from partners that can make us get to where we want to be. So for this meeting, the theme is safe, connected and sustainable places, and we decided that we would ask for your response to analytical data in relation to serious violence and killed and injured casualties on roads. So that is over to you. Paul and Gary, welcome. Thank you very much for coming. And, you know, if there are other things that people want to raise, not directly related to the theme, but more generally related to community safety and feeling safe, then I'm sure Paul and Gary, it's lovely to have you here. Hopefully you'll be able to answer some questions, but I'm going to go over to you for the report. And thank you very much, Gary, for coming along to the pre-agenda and for helping Stephanie make sure that the report reflected your work. So we've departed a bit in this report, as you've probably seen, from our usual style to accommodate that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for inviting me today to speak about serious violent crime in Medway. It's important that we as the police and our partners are held accountable for that. I think before I go on, I just want to reassure people of the absolute commitment of the police in this area in tackling serious violent crime. It's the #1 priority for us within local policing, and I'm going to talk about data and things as I go through, but it's important that we caveat that at the start with this impacts on people, it's impacted on people's lives. The data we talk about all relate back to people and families that have in some cases suffered the ultimate price in relation to violence in losing loved ones. So when I speak on topics like this, I always start with that way, because I wouldn't want to hurt feelings or cause hurt inadvertently by talking about data. And keeping people safe is my #1 job, and it's Paul's #1 job. And if he doesn't get it right, I can always replace him, which is good. Just joking to see if anyone's listening. Let's move on. So what I started with in the presentation that's up in front of you is just the Kent Police Control Strategy. And I know people are not here today to listen to strategy and diagrams and all the rest of it, but these are the guiding principles of how we address serious violent crime and other issues of vulnerability within policing. I can answer questions on that later, but what I want to try and do is to breathe some life into that as we go through and see how that translates into our daily business, because that's the most important thing. The exam question, as it were, was the slide and the data that was provided, which showed Medway slightly out of kilter with national data in relation to rates of serious violence, and to offer up some explanation as to why that may be and what we're doing about it. And we all know that data has its limitations, especially in comparable, because places are not directly comparable, but as we go through, we may talk about where that data is heading now and where we are. Just from the data, we can see a peak there in 2017, I think, and then a drop-off into what was a COVID period, but then slightly tracking down now, coming towards the England and Wales average, which is good in some ways, I suppose, but again, as we talked about, one serious violent crime is probably one too many. So let's just talk about where we are now. This data was a rolling year, which is how we look at things. We look at some data, I look at rolling months and years and all of that kind of stuff, but rolling year I find the easiest to track where we were this year in comparison to last year, and there is a positive picture in there, especially around violence against the person and most serious violence, which is tracking on a downward trend. Again, some of that is how we record data, so data is not everything, but an improving picture in that respect. Drug offences, you'll see, are going up, as are possession of drugs, and in some cases their possession of weapons. Some of that is a positive, because that work is linked to proactive work. We only get to trafficking of drugs and possession of drugs if we're out there doing proactive work, because if we're not doing it, they'll have really low figures, and we won't be doing our job. So although, again, the numbers are higher than we'd like to, it shows what we are doing in relation to that. This next slide you'll look at, it's quite hard to follow on there. It's on the presentation. We have 3 hotspot zones in Medway that are defined by data from the government and the Home Office linked to violent crime, knife crime and antisocial behaviour. They're linked, as you'll see there in the top left, in Rochester, mainly focused in and around the area of the High Street there, Chatham town, again on the bottom left, and then Gillingham. And there are 13, I think, Paul, across the county in various areas. So we've got 3 of those, which again offers us some opportunity in how we tackle violent crime. I just want to put the caveat on here as well. There are places and locations on there that doesn't mean they're out of control. That's just data that shows that they are higher than other areas and other places. That's related to the types of venue they are and footfall and whatnot. So I don't want to get carried away with that, but what it does highlight is some of the data and the absolute focus we have on violent crime as a policing service. The most important thing I think to talk about is kind of what we are doing and what we do. We have a community safety partnership here in Medway. It's led by Councillor Alex Patterson, and I report to him on it. So it wouldn't be right if I didn't say he does an excellent job from my perspective in putting Medway first to try and absolutely hold us to account in relation to violence against women and girls, drugs and antisocial behaviour as police-led issues. But there is real partnership approach to all of those areas, and it's important that we kind of set that out at the start of this presentation. We have a community safety unit at Medway, and Paul is here today. He's the inspector for that. He leads that locally. We have around 50 members of staff that are dedicated to our local communities, listening to issues within beats and specific areas. We have a neighbourhood task force in relation to that, which we use to go and deal with specific problems, predominantly at the moment linked to serious violence, I think it's fair to say. In Medway, we have a proactive investigation team as well that look at county lines and gangs, and they've had some significant success, which we'll talk about shortly. But it just gives you some of the mechanism that's there to deal with serious violence. It's not just an ad hoc process. I move on there to highlight the national intelligence model and local force level tasking arrangements. So just to put you in the picture of how we look at this every day, I get a full report daily on all matters that are going on in Medway, lots of which relate to violent crime, and every day we're tasking activity linked to that. So we don't wait for meetings to look at stuff and address it, whether it be an operation, whether it be arresting people and prioritising that and putting them as high risk and throwing the force might at it. That's looked at daily. But that national intelligence model and how we use it in Kent is what we do monthly. So monthly there is a real focus on all crime types, but violent crime being a real priority of that. We use our data hub, which links to the Cambridge Crime Harm Score. So it's tracking serious violence and harm linked to individuals, locations, and venues. So there's a lot of data and analysis that goes into that every month that then leads into a formal tasking process where we will put the resources of the force into the areas that have the most significant issues within our towns, which I'm hoping is reflected in some of the gains we're being able to make in those crime reductions. And again, it's not just about data, it links back to Paul and his team and what communities are actually saying is going on in their own communities. So I'm not all in with data in terms of that is all that guides me, but there is, I came last time I think and someone talked about Southend and how they really scrutinise data and look at issues, and I just wanted to set it out here that we do the same. It's not a finger in the air approach to serious violence in Medway. Certainly there's a lot of focus that goes into that. I know Mark's here, he was in the violence reduction unit, which we still have within the force. And we use that to look at themes and trends and issues that are going on as well. Within that tasking process, that will then lead into what we're doing. So we do have our hotspots. We do have extra government funding, which we've put into place, which has significantly uplifted the patrolling hours and officers that we were seeing within those areas. Paul, I don't know whether we've got current data in terms of hours, just to give people a picture of that.
Yes, so from the 1st of June till the... Sorry, apologies. From the 1st of June till the end of August, we had over 1,000 hours in Chatham alone from officers, uniformed officers deployed to Chatham, 600 hours for Gillingham, and I think it was about 440 hours in Rochester, just showing the number of hours that we're actually spending in those areas, and that's across all uniformed staff. We're obviously uplifting our staff using Home Office funding, but we have different priorities for each area as well. So Chatham's focus will be slightly different to Rochester. We noticed that Rochester, if you look back a couple of slides, it will be more nighttime economy focused. It will be in the evening, so we make sure that we increase our staff in the evening in Rochester to keep those safe on a nighttime economy, whereas actually Gillingham and Chatham, it might be more daytime focused.
Thanks, Paul. We then link into individuals, not just locations. So we have priority nominals that are tasked out specifically because they will be the people that are at risk of causing most serious harm to people within Medway. And we would target them in various different ways, some of which is support elements to deter and prevent crime. It's not just enforcement, but we do look at that in an overall sense and not just on an individual basis. We've got OpChecker locally, which is a cohort of people run by a child-centred policing team that are at the most risk of serious violence and knife crime, and we've got an enhanced regime working with yacht social services within Medway, the VRU, health, all that kind of, my favourite word, holistic approach to looking at those individuals. But we are doing that to try and prevent them going on to commit crime, but also become victims of crime themselves, because that must be the ultimate aim. And as Paul said, we have problem management plans. We have a number of them across Medway. I think we've got 49, not just linked to serious violent crime, but linked to significant issues locally where we're trying to address those threats. And then we build that up into our serious crime directorate that looks at organised crime groups, where there's a whole mechanism and process that sits behind that for people that and groups that are involved in organised crime in Medway. So there is a lot of governance and mechanism and thought and analysis that goes into what we do. But I suppose that has to translate into some activity. So at the end of the report, and I know it's different, I just tried to put a few pictures up there of some of that work in action and what that translates into locally. We're hoping to do a lot more of this. Town centres are really important to us because they are areas where lots of the community go to and should enjoy and feel safe in. That doesn't mean we're not looking at other areas and beats and places within Medway where there are specific and individual issues. On the right-hand side was an operation where we recovered a number of weapons, which is concerning in some ways, but shows the focus that's on there. And then on the left-hand side that's covered in the report, I'm keen to rattle through this to answer any questions really, but a specific job where officers were in Chatham High Street, pursued someone, found a knife, some drugs, and then that's gone on to a successful prosecution where the individual will be awaiting trial in relation to that. On the right-hand side was a specific operation linked to drugs and county lines and other areas, which just shows what specific operations can do as opposed to the day-to-day ongoing focus. And they're just some case studies on there that I put in there for people that can look at it and rattle through. I don't propose to go through them now, but what I've offered is a view on how we tackle serious violent crime in Medway and what we're trying to do and how we'd like to think that there is a lot of thought and effort that goes into it. But we've still got areas to improve on. Those numbers are still too high. We still need to make gains. We're not here to be defensive and say, we're doing brilliantly and we all move on. I don't think people expect that from the police. They need a bit of humility to say we need to do more. I'm convinced our neighbourhood work and model and the focus is the answer to that, because I don't want to go back to the stage where for whatever reason, we're just answering calls. We need to be in and of and with our communities to understand what the issues are. And they're not just words, because I've put on there what's actually happened. But again, I'll finish by saying my thoughts are with those that have been affected by serious violent crime, and you've heard my commitment to challenging that, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Gary. And obviously, we're going to split this so that we deal with the road safety element afterwards, because I think there are distinct differences. And I think, first of all, for you, it's not a scrutiny committee. We're here to think about the impact of these issues on health and to collectively solve problems. So I appreciate your frankness, and it goes without saying we can see the numbers for ourselves. And we have got the Community Safety Partnership, as you quite rightly mentioned, under Alex, dealing with these things in live time. So we're focusing today on the impact that this has on health. I'll just remind that to people. And that includes mental health, obviously, whether people feel safe and so on. It includes economic health, actually, because there's such a big focus on our high streets, and reputationally, we don't want Medway to be in this situation. Obviously, there's an impact on NHS colleagues who are here. When we get these traumatic injuries, there's the practicality of the hospital having to face the expertise for dealing with them, and then dealing with the families and the associates from both sides of those crimes who might rock up there. So I know that that has an impact both on your staff's well-being and indeed on your security. So I think it's important to say that. For me, I think the focus on the high streets is right. And perhaps I would like to know a little bit more about the work that you do jointly with licensing, because there's no doubt in my mind that the casino rooms is a focus for violence. That, as a Rochester councillor, that's reported to me practically every week, particularly by people who live in the high street, who witness you know, fights at sort of chuck-out time. I know that Lauren Edwards MP has been out on patrol with you, that she was very grateful for that in Rochester, and I think you're right, it's a position particularly associated with the nighttime economy. And in Chatham, the Town Centre Forum has joined with the council and provided ambassadors on the street for the summer. That they're running out of money now, but I think that's a scheme that worked well, and I've had a lot of positive feedback about the visibility of the police, the visibility of the ambassadors, and the impact that that's made on people feeling safe. We know as well, everybody, that the early discharge scheme, inherently right in itself, as long as we know where people are and we're looking after them, has had its vagaries. We've had people coming into Medway who have been discharged early, who are not supposed to be coming here for one reason or another, but do, without the probation service and all of us knowing about it. I think that is being corrected now, and that information's being shared. So there's been a bit of a storm of things that have impacted our high streets, and for Chatham, at a time when we've got a new population coming in, already occupying some of the new homes that we've built there, and obviously we want them to feel happy and safe as well, but their very presence changes what you're able to do. So for me, can we do more with licensing together? It is a question. You needn't answer that now, because I think I'll give other people an opportunity, please. So anybody? You've baffled everyone. Stephen, you're coming in, and Eddie. And I would just also say to everybody, we've got our Combating Drugs conference coming up in October, and I think it would be very nice to see the police there sharing some of this information and thinking about, with colleagues in the Forward Trust, how we can go. So I'll take Stephen first, then Eddie, then Mark, then Councillor Tijan, okay?
Really good. Working? Oh, there we go. Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. Really good to see about the great work that police are doing in terms of tackling serious violence in Medway. And I think some of the numbers from just to introduce myself to everyone, I met before, I'm Stephen Barnes. I'm Service Manager for Forward Trust in Medway, so we're the substance misuse service delivering treatment for drug and alcohol services. And some of the figures that you represent in terms of the rise of drug-related incidents, that's probably, we see parallels with that in service in terms of the amount of safeguarding referrals that we're making and what we're seeing coming through our doors and the different issues that our service users are facing. And one of the things that we've picked up on the last few weeks, obviously there's been a big spotlight on Chatham High Street as an area where there's been lots of incidents that have been happening. And a lot of our service users, or some of our service users, are picking up sort of dispersal orders or areas that are moving them away from Chatham High Street. And I'm wondering what's the plan going forward for those people that still have those issues that they're facing in terms of housing, social care needs, mental health needs, and actually, is it pushing it away from Chatham High Street, but the problems still existing?
Yep, no problems. Thanks, Stephen. I think you hit at the crux of the issue, really, that you can't just police your way out of it. It's a partnership approach and trying to work together. And I know that Paul and the team are looking at ways further to work with partners to help people and support them to move them into areas of recovery where they're not exhibiting that lifestyle. So that's all part of the approach and the problem management plan that we've got for Chatham and the surrounding areas, because we don't just want to push things up a road where we just forget about them and don't get reported. The aim must be to support people to move out unless there are issues that are obvious enforcement issues that we need to sort. So that's part of our focus.
I mean, Stephen, can I ask you, are you getting enough information from the police when that happens, or is it too retrospective for you to be able to put things in place to make a difference? And if so, is that something we can change?
I certainly feel like we are starting to. I know we've been invited to a few meetings in recent weeks, and we're starting to get some outreach going with police around the high street and part of different forums. So I certainly feel like that information is starting to come through. So I'm really hopeful that actually that's something we're going to be able to support with in achieving that sort of agenda and the aims together.
So for our assurance, do you feel that you can speak up, your links are good enough to do that? Because obviously, Stephen, you are commissioned by us. We want to know that you're getting the support that you need to do the job we've asked you to do.
Yes, I absolutely feel we're getting in the right direction. We're building those relationships.
That's good news. So Eddie, please.
Thank you, Chair. May I first of all say that I'm really glad to hear of your proactive approach rather than reactive, and what sounds like a desire to work with us, teamwork. You already mentioned Councillor Patterson, and as you know, this administration is very, very keen to work with all the different enforcement teams, so that's the ones within the council, and I expect that approach is supported by all the parties in the council. Could you answer this question? Do you think Chatham Centre deserves its reputation as a drug-taking centre? And the relationship between drugs and Wellbeing is very key to our work. So I work at Stanley House, you may know it, in Chatham. And we had a resident that overdosed on heroin, and he took crystalline meth as well. And Billy the Quid, you may know that person, he used to come knocking on the door in the early hours of the morning. And we get very much the impression from what we get told that it is very much a hotspot of drug trafficking. So I'd be interested to hear whether you agree with that. You also say that that you have been doing specific targeting of areas at specific times. Is this a relative new thing? Does this link with my final question, which is, have you actually been able to identify a systematic way of bringing down crime? And therefore, the bringing down the statistics that you've displayed today, do you expect them to continue to come down? Thank you.
So I'll deal with the first point, and I never want to be a soundbite. So I'm not going to say that Chatham is the drug capital of England or anything in relation of that kind. There are challenges with relation to drug use in Chatham. What I would say is that I'm confident we've got the right process and approach to deal with that and to deal with the individuals. That it has to be, as Stephen alluded to, a partnership approach, because these issues, whilst enforcement is a key part of it, that's not the only part of it. So that's what I'll say in relation to that, and we will continue to absolutely engage with local communities to deal with specific issues that they raise, and we won't stop the focus on dealing with those that seek to traffic drugs within Medway, as the statistics will bear out. The last question, talking about will we see this keep dropping down, I don't know is the answer. We have invigorated the way in which we look at crime by going back to tasking processes around what was the national intelligence model to address serious violence and other issues within Medway. So we are hoping to see a continued reduction. Some of that will be related to how crime's recorded and how things change over time. But am I confident in the approach we have to serious violence and issues you raise, such as organised crime and drugs? Yes, is the short answer to that. Thank you, Councillor.
Oh, sorry, yeah, I know. But the idea of specific targeting, is that relatively new? Has that helped to bring the recent figures down?
Sorry, I didn't address that. You're quite right. I don't think it's particularly new. I think that these issues will have been raised before in terms of crime reduction and addressing crime, but we are looking at those fundamentals of policing and making sure that they're being used in Medway. So I don't think they're new, but they are part of our focus to most effectively address crime.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the police officers for the report. I was interested in what was being said about vulnerability and ensuring also that people who are vulnerable don't themselves fall into criminality. How are we tackling the issue of picking people up at when I say picking people up, I mean identifying people at a young age, and the work we do with schools and the youth offending team, which is outlined there. It must be very challenging because we don't want to stereotype people at a very young age. On the other hand, some people who are likely to be offenders are able to be identified at a young age. So how do we, in as short a time as possible, if you could explain to me, how do we get through this situation without antagonising families, working with schools to ensure that young people who might be tempted into a life of criminality with knives, drugs and what have you, county lines simply aren't?
Before you come back, please, I'm going to ask Mark Powell, who's our Youth Justice Manager, to come in.
Thank you. I think it's a challenging question for us all, but it's the right question in terms of that, how do we prevent things from happening? And as was generously mentioned, I had been working within the Violence Reduction Unit where that had been a focus for the work across the whole of the county. I think we understand a lot of the risk factors that exist. So that might be within the individual, that might be within their family and household, that might be within their neighbourhood and community. So we can often know those people we are most worried about so that we can start to think about, children, usually, teenagers, that we should be looking to intervene with. And part of the work that we do in Medway is we use sort of different pots of government funding, some from the Ministry of Justice, some from the Home Office, to identify those children and target those children to offer support. We do that in collaboration with the police, with the Child Centre Policing team, who are part of that work, but also the youth service, because some of that work needs to take place in the communities in which children live. And at times the violence may happen in those hotspots, those sort of town centres, those transport hubs. But if we can target children where they live, then actually we can make those places safer, and it prevents those children from then, entering into those hotspots. So I think that's some of the approach that we take, which is about that sharing of information, that understanding who are the children, who are the families, because when we're thinking about children, there are parents or carers involved who needs to be a part of that solution. And I think it is I think we're trying to increase the amount of targeted preventative work, like I say, with Child Centre Policing, with the youth service, as well as with my service. So it's a more of a holistic, wrapped around piece of work. There will inevitably and sadly always be some of those children who go on to offend or who go on to be victims of serious violence, because around about 30% of the victims of serious violence are children. So, they are a cohort we should be thinking about and worrying about, both as perpetrators of violence, but also as kind of potential victims of violence.
Kelly, did you want to add anything? That's fine. I was just really, thinking in terms of whether the family hubs are partnered to identify a vulnerable family or a family who might be vulnerable to being recruited, because I think, the shift to trauma-informed practice stands up what you've been telling us about, Mark, and we know now that the perpetrators of crime, as you say, are often those who've been victims themselves. So I just think those kind of links are really critical. Kelly, I don't know if you've got a comment on that.
That's the work we're doing as a service, ensuring that we're all joined up together. Mark is building his relationship with Nikki Lloyd, who's the service manager for our family hubs across Medway, so ensuring that early intervention and prevention work starts at the earliest opportunity.
And I think, Mark Jones, we've got Andrew here, the wider point about vulnerable adults. Obviously, our partnerships of safeguarding do address those, and whether, when I come back to you, you've got any comments on whether this kind of cuckooing has you know, gone up or down, or whether it's still going on. And it occurs to me, you know, our housing providers and indeed ourselves as a housing provider may be able to do more than we're doing to prevent that if you think it's an issue. So I don't know if you've got anything to add, particularly Andrew. I'm just, you know, noting that it's important that you're here and that work is going on. So I'll go back to the police then.
So sadly, we do still see incidents of cuckooing. We are working more collaboratively with housing, and we do get those information streams coming into us, that intelligence that we can do something with. I think that is a positive, and that does work. I think it's always got to be on the radar. I think having a neighbourhood policing model helps that, because you've got individuals there that make those relationships. So yes, it is happening. We do deal with it. We do support people. We have various mechanisms in place supporting additional strategic things that are in place locally, but we have vulnerability panels where we look at individuals and how we can best support them. We then even move up to closing down locations and residents where sadly people have not engaged with us, but that activity is still going on, because there is a wider impact, not just on that individual, but in communities that live in and around those areas. We've seen that in various media releases lately. So cuckooing is still a focus, it's still an issue, still a problem. I think we've got the right mechanisms and information sharing. And I will just go back on the child policing focus. We've got a really good child policing team in Medway. DS Raj Dosanjh leads that, reports to Paul. He's got a strong approach on that. We must remember that children are children, and our ultimate aim must be to deter and prevent them becoming involved or victims of crime. But we're working in good partnership to do that, and where we come out the other side and sadly that children are committing crime and serious crime, we address that and take enforcement where it's needed to be. So I hope that deals with both sides of the question.
Very happy with all the answers I received. Look forward to the results continuing to come through. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Gary, for your report. I mean, in your presentation, you highlighted how Medway continue to experience rates of serious violence and road casualty above the national average. And you also explain how you were using data analysis to inform operational decision and resource allocation. So I just want to probe in terms of whether you could tell us specifically what measurable outcome has emerged from these data-driven interventions, and how are they being evaluated against the joint local health and well-being strategy targets for 2027, 2028. And I would like to come back after that.
So to address the first point, I suppose seeing some crime come down is a good sign in relation to that. Also seeing our solved outcome rates, what we are solving in terms of victim-based crime, that's a measurement of an increased productivity for officers. I don't have any other specific answer. I don't think. What kind of outcome are you looking for? Where do you want me to go with the answer is what I'm probably asking.
Thank you, Chair. No, basically, yeah, just want to understand whether there's any example of successful intervention where these data analysis had directly led to improved safety or safety outcomes.
So in terms of the overall data is showing an improving picture, which I think is an outcome. I think that sometimes the data leads to specific increases in solved outcomes, which I've mentioned, which is important. I think we look at some of the harm scores around Medway, where we use like I've said before, the Cambridge Harm Index, where we've seen things reduce and see less harmful crime going on, and also where we look at our hotspots. What I'm looking at there is seeing some of the reductions in crime that we've seen there. As I've said, we've seen Gillingham have a slight increase in crime, and it's important that we try and understand why that is. I think as important as the data is looking at those problem management plans that we've got. So data informs why we're in a certain area, and data informs a level of success in terms of where we look at what the outputs are, as I've put there today. But also as important is the surveying that we do and the My Community Voice work. We're asking people that the data's telling us this, but does it feel safer? Is it safer for you? Because not everyone experiences crime in the same way, and data is not everything. And some of that has been positive, especially in areas where we've had specific projects like Clear Hold Build within Chatham. So I could take it away and give you a more definitive answer, but those are some of the kind of areas where I think that data approach and what we've looked at has led to some good outcomes coming out the other side of it. And I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. You sort of answered the question. I mean, when I asked about measuring elsewhere, I was looking about benchmarking. As Medway, obviously, figures slightly higher than. I just wonder whether you knew of any success story anywhere else in the country.
Not specifically that I can think of off the top of my head, but when we're looking at benchmarking in our data, we do look at sort of upper and lower levels of acceptability and whether crimes are spiking out of control in those areas. So we do benchmark to previous years and where we are. I think the issue sometimes is we change how we record crime. Sometimes certain areas record crime slightly differently, although there are a clear set of rules around that. So that's something I could take away and come back and update on about benchmarking if I could.
Thank you, Habib. And just on licensing, you know, can we do anything? Can we change anything? Because, you know, I'm very conscious that some of these hotspots just carry on and don't attempt to join in with consequences of the way that their clientele behave.
Yeah, I won't speak to individual cases, but I'll start off by saying that the licensing team is a central function in Kent Police, but they are based out of our police station, so we do have strong representation. They are clear and direct in what they expect of places and acts where they need to in line with the law. Some things we're bound by legislation and where process is, but certainly we are strong in terms of the enforcement and the direction given. Can we do better? Potentially in certain areas. I think that there is joined up liaison with council apparatus, so I think that does exist. But if there are individual cases that people want to raise with me or Paul, certainly we would take them away and provide a more detailed update where we can.
Right, if there's no more questions on that section, I'm going to ask Gary and Paul to go on to the road safety element, because they've got another part of the presentation, the second appendix, everybody. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. So I've been asked to come and speak about killed and seriously injured on the roads in Medway. I want to start by saying I've linked in closely with our roads policing team. I've spoken to my colleagues at Cold Harbour about this because I want to speak specifically about Medway, but obviously it is the Kent and Medway Road Safety Partnership. And there's 4 elements of the partnership: enforcement, engagement, education and engineering. And Kent Police lead on enforcement. But I start by saying it is a partnership, and therefore Kent Police, KFRS, KCC, Medway Council and Highways are all interlinked. But my focus today is going to be on the enforcement bit and what we're doing, but we work closely with obviously all other partners, and that's what we're going to discuss. But the data that I've been provided is obviously that Medway is above the national average for killed and seriously injured. Before I go into anything, I need to start. It's a very different subject to what Mr. Cook has just spoken about, but the message from me is exactly the same. Any fatality on a road in Medway is too many because of the impact it has on the family and loved ones. Therefore, the collective approach from the partnership will continue until we can obviously eradicate any fatalities in Medway or seriously injured. So I can't stress that enough. I'll probably say it quite a few times during my presentation. but that will be the focus. Now, the data says that we're above the national average, and it breaks it down into per billion miles. So I think it's only right that we talk about the makeup of Medway's roads to start with, because it is compared to peer counties. Now, Medway is a very densely populated area with urban roads. A lot of those are very old as well. Population of Medway, correct me if I'm wrong, it's about 280,000, and obviously it's increasing. So the number of vehicles on the road is increasing daily. To get to 1 billion miles, you're going to have to do a lot of driving in Medway, because there is only 5.5 miles of motorway in Medway. Now, it's compared against its peers, one of those being Lancashire, which has got about 167 miles. So you can imagine you're going to reach 1 billion very, very much quicker in Lancashire than you would in Medway. And I think that's a really important part, because you are more likely to have an accident or a crash in the roads where you're navigating roundabouts, road traffic lights, etc., etc. So I'm not going to talk too much about it, but I think it needs to be context-led, which is why I've mentioned it early in the presentation. And I've put on there, now this is the killed and seriously injured casualties in collisions in Medway. Now, you can see from the right, which is the total casualty collisions, that it's reducing over the last 10 years. I have specifically not put on there, and correct me, you can correct me, anyone, if you like. I haven't put on there fatals, because as I've said from the outset, one is too many. So I don't want to be here today saying we've had a reduction or anything like that, because all the time there is at least one fatal accident in Medway. We need to be working on it. So you can see we have slightly gone up in 2023, and I have got the figures in front of me for 2024, which has seen a slight increase as well in seriously injured, which is up to 125. But over the last 10 years, casualties in Medway have reduced, but killed and seriously injured has gone up. Now, a reduction in fatals and an increase in killed and seriously injured could be a number of reasons. Technology, obviously vehicles have improved. Road furniture has improved, and we've seen a reduction, obviously, in some of the speed limits around Medway. So what might have been a fatal many years ago might not be now. However, it won't change our work. And that's the slide, as Mr. Cook said, about the exam questions, that we are above, but that is in context to the per billion miles. And I think that is a really important part that we need to take away, is the makeup of Medway's roads. So I have broken it down into vulnerable road users. So you can see Medway is above, specifically on ages 16 to 24 and you're 60 plus. It's across the board, but they are the two areas that we really need to work on. So Operation Spotlight, which runs on the 22nd of this month till the 5th of October. It's a national operation, and it's targeting young drivers. I know that 80% of drivers that have fatal road accidents are male. Therefore, we need to target that, and that will be through enforcement. And that will be that operation. We do work all the time, but that is a specific operation targeting young drivers, and we will be supported across Medway by our tactical operations support, and we will be giving education inputs through schools as well. We will be going to known locations where young people meet. So, for instance, an example would be a McDonald's in the evening and stuff, to make sure we are focusing on those areas. With this 60 plus as well, we have got to improve, I think, on the 751s, which is the ability for an eye test. So over 60s, if you're involved in a road traffic accident, we can ask anyone to conduct an eye test at the roadside. We have improved, but there is work to go there, and I think that is an easy way to improve our approach to identifying those that actually might not necessarily should be on the road at this moment in time. And that's something that, having spoken to my colleagues at Tactical Operations, they're looking to do. And a D751E is specifically around eye tests. So that's something I learned. Vehicle types, as you can see, it's mainly cars that are involved, but we are also showing that cyclists in Medway are above the national average. So we need to make, again, education there, and that's where partnership work comes in through our partners within the Kent and Medway partnership. But enforcement as well, because we need to make sure that those using the roads are able and suitable to do so. Mr. Cook has also covered a very similar slide to me here on what we are doing. So here in Medway, we, as I've said, our tactical operations team, our traffic units, we have targeted activity, local officers within the community safety unit, local policing teams, and my road traffic units. They will target specific locations daily, acting on information, and also those that are known to be using the roads without insurance or a licence. We have national operations that are led, and that is how we will tackle that. We deliver bike safety, which is an education input by the motorbike team around developing those skills to use on the roads. KFS continue to provide biker down, which is obviously a safety element. And then we've got our road safety unit who target the fatal 4 elements, which is speeding, drug driving, mobile phones, and obviously seat belts. The Fatal 4 campaigns run throughout the year and generally led by the road traffic unit and the community safety unit. And then locally, obviously, we've got Speedwatch and beat officers now. We have got invested heavily in neighbourhood policing here in Medway, and one of the standing objectives for all the officers is to increase the number of Speedwatch programmes we've got in Medway. This was a recent operation. Some of you might have got stuck in the traffic as a result of this. I make no apologies for that. It was on the 19th of August, and this was fantastic work by one of the beat officers in collaboration with Medway Council. We've seen an increased concern of e-bikes and nuisance vehicles in Rochester High Street. So the beat officer working with the council put on a road closure within the High Street, closed the High Street down and put a feeder lane through Corporation Street, meaning that everybody got pulled into the bus coach park. I think it was run for 9 hours. I think the High Street was closed for 4. Fantastic piece of work, because not only is it partnership work targeting those fatal 4s, but also it led to 56 traffic offence reports being issued, 9 Section 59 warnings for nuisance vehicles, 10 vehicles being seized, no insurance, driving without a licence. All of these are a danger to our roads. And multiple arrests were made as well. A number of e-scooters, as you can see, I know that's a raising concern for everybody locally. They were taken off the roads of Medway on that one particular day, which I think is a real plus. And it just shows the importance of having those local officers out on the street and listening to the concerns. And then here's some figures for the fatal 4 offences. So as you can see, it's a bit blurry from where I am, but it's stayed pretty static. You know, they're good numbers. Our road policing officers are used across the board. They're specialist officers. They assist in missing persons as well, and they're drone pilots. But as you can see, these priorities remain, and they are still targeting those offences which lead to killed and seriously injured on Medway's roads.
Thank you, Paul. Before, I mean, it's very good to hear that, and I was away actually on the 19th of August, so I wasn't stuck in any traffic there, but I do think that is effective not just of and in itself, but also sending a message that that can happen. And obviously, that number of traffic offence reports issued indicates that there are people who are trying to evade the law. So absolutely well done from that. I'm afraid that people around the table will have seen a rise in the use of e-bikes and trikes and other unlicensed vehicles on the road. In particular, people doing wheelies with them in front of, sort of, you know, playing very dangerous chicken in front of traffic. That seems to have been a huge increase in people doing that, particularly on these sort of kind of things that look and behave a bit like a sit-on lawnmower, but are used very, very fast. In fact, just yesterday, one decided to drive through our local petrol garage, causing havoc driving in and out. And of course, they haven't got a number plate on. The report is difficult to make, and very often the people driving them obscure their faces with masks. So I wonder if you've got any sort of additional grip or things to say about that, because I don't know how the people feel, but I've had a lot of casework traffic on that, and it's noticeable to me.
Yeah, Councillor, that's very valid and something that I'm well aware of. I've spoken on BBC Radio Kent about exactly that, the increased concern and nuisance that is. But I don't think people realise the danger that they're putting themselves and others in, because obviously that sort of driving is putting others at risk. What I would say is that's where we have invested heavily with our neighbourhood officers. I'm sure, well, hopefully, all of you around the room here have seen an increase, and they are out and they're targeting that sort of behaviour. We are now running operations monthly to target that sort of those offences. We will seize those, they'll be taken off the road, and those people will be prosecuted.
Do you make enough use of our CCTV when you're looking for those kinds of things? Because obviously, you know, we've got a big unit that we run in partnership with Kindy, and I've been there several times. And it's interesting to me to know whether everybody who needs to know is aware that it exists and how to access it. So
I believe we do. We've got good relations with CCTV, and actually Mr Cook and I met with the director, and also Neil has just recently started as well, and we spoke, and I meet with Neil monthly to find out what cameras are actually not working, because that is something that I need. I think it links in nicely to both, not just killed and seriously injured, but also serious violence. We need to make sure that we have got that relationship.
It's just to build on that. I think we can do better with technology here and problem-solving plans. And certainly Paul's looking at this at the minute, looking at other areas across the country which are having greater success maybe than what we are in terms of dealing with this, looking at portable cameras and how we can address that. We utilise that now with council colleagues, but I think we can do better. I think part of this, policing's become a lot more complex, and this is not a woe me, but when I look back at when I first started in policing and the amount of time we had to proactively stop and deal with vehicles, it was a lot more. So the challenge to us now is to go, well, how can we do it smarter and use technology to do it in a better sense so that we can then enforce on things like Section 59 warnings where people are driving in antisocial manner, where we can seize vehicles but we can track it back. So that person in your petrol station can be effectively targeted, not by a grainy image, but by somewhere that we can proactively deploy the best technology to then track them back. So that's our challenge, to do a bit better there, I think, Councillor, is my view.
And coming in, but I would just say I'm very pleased with Neil's performance. He's brought a lot of refreshed ideas from his previous experience. So he's certainly somebody who has got a very good understanding of the way technology can be deployed, and of quite small changes that we could make to improve that sort of pickup. So I'm very pleased that you're working with him and having the monthly meetings. Leanne, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just interested to know about road safety in terms of the use of child car seats. At one stage, Medway, I don't think, did very well, but there's been a lot of work through schools and family hubs, etc., etc. But in my, moving around the Medway geography, going to visit schools and that, I, just as a civilian, can see they're not being used, and that's dangerous, really, really dangerous for young children. So can you just comment on that and just give us some context, because I'm just from a civilian point of view, but it seems to me I am noticed.
Yeah, I suppose it should be an absolute priority for us. I think that's where the neighbourhood policing and the child-centred policing team and that intelligence kind of community, we can make some improvements on, and certainly have a focus within our child-centred policing team to go into schools and engage and say, we are really wanting to target this. If you are seeing these issues day in, day out, and you might feel that they're not unimportant, but not worthy of the police's time, then they need to tell us. And I think that's the best way of tackling it, because we wouldn't routinely see and stop people all day, every day, because it doesn't happen like that. It's targeting those specific places and locations, and the people that can give us that information are our partners. So that is definitely something we can take forward and focus on.
It's quite an easy one, really, because the parents are at the school waiting at the gates. That's how I'm seeing it, because they're all congregating, so it's en masse. So working smarter, it's probably quite, relatively straightforward one.
I completely agree with you, and in line with the operation in Rochester, that's somewhere we can tweak that and take it to one of the larger schools or areas where there's a bigger problem. So that's something we'll take forward, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you. And just sort of further to that, it does sound as if your neighbourhood policing model is working in terms of visibility. I have got that feedback for you. You know, it has been noticeable. We've got very good attendance by neighbourhood officers coming along to community cafes and those kinds of things, which is welcome. Last year, we felt that there'd been a pulling away from policing in schools, in other words, making regular visits. Is that being reinvigorated with the neighbourhood policing team? Because I think it's something that, I know some schools resist that because they're worried about reputation, but in general, schools welcome that kind of support, sort of very, obvious and hands-on from the police. So I'm wondering if that's sort of moving back a bit, and if it is, I know that would be welcome.
Certainly a priority for the child-centred policing team, which is well populated, well led, and well led by Paul. That is an absolute priority for us to stay involved in schools, and a commitment to get into as many, as often as we can. So that's not going to change. I know we slightly changed our offering in terms of officers being based permanently in certain schools, which the model's not likely to go back to that way, but we will do all we can to be in the schools as often as possible.
Anything else that we can do in terms of highways that would make things better? You know, this issue that you raised at the beginning, Paul, of the complexities of Medway's road network is one that taxes a lot of brains every day, including with the state of the roads. And you will have seen we've had a very different focus in the last year on trying to do larger and much better quality repairs in the busiest areas where the roads have been most degraded. But that does mean that there's more of a backlog now in the back roads, as you say, some of which are very old anyway. But I mean, if there's advice that you can give us in areas where you think a reduction in the speed limit would be beneficial, have you got a sufficiently robust operation and liaison with our highways teams? Because, you know, we've got a lot of things going on. We've got our active travel policy. We'll see in the next report the way we're trying to reduce the number of cars on the road. But if there's anything more that we can be involved in at those kind of technical levels, then, you know, being able to recommend that from this board would obviously be advantageous.
Councillor, I think it's a valid point, but what I would also say is that highways feature heavily in the strategic partnership. So they are involved in all of the decision making. And what I would say is, being a resident of Medway, I think it's really good the way that you are advertising as well, the road improvements that you've made, and because actually residents need to see that as well. So I feel that, as I said at the start, police do the enforcement bit, and it's very much a partnership approach. And I think that all parties are involved in that, and priority-wise, that's how I would say that.
That's kind of the answer that I was hoping for, but it's important to test that as far as this body is concerned. Any other questions on the last part of Gary's report? So I've got Stephen, Eddie and Habib and Malty. I'm going to take Malty first because she's had a hand up for a while, and Claire, I'll come to you.
Got there in the end. Thank you for your presentation. I was very mindful of your comment around the eye testing and 60-plus population. I was just wondering if you have contacts with health services who do provide some driving advice and assessments for those with health conditions. If not, then I'm very happy to put you in contact with them.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. Absolutely. I say I'm not an expert on that in any way, shape, or form. So any advice and support we can be given on that, but that is something that is something that is available to us. So if you're willing to provide that, then I'll be grateful. Thank you.
I'll take the action of putting you in touch with the service. I don't provide the service, but yeah.
I'm going to come to Claire, then I'll come to Eddie and Habib, as she hasn't spoken for yet.
Thank you. I'd like to revisit your point about e-bikes and scooters, because I think it's about safety, but actually that sense of feeling safe in community. So I think it talks to both of the data sets. Are we making the most use of tech in terms of empowering the public to be able to report where they're seeing it? I understand, I agree, they're wearing balaclavas and you can't be all places all times, but actually are we making the best use of tech where people can drop a pin to sort of give you more information, build up your intelligence on where it's happening?
So in some senses, yes, we are, because we've increased things such as dams, which offers people the ability to upload footage straight to us, and we've got a better provision now as in terms of how people can provide us information. Do we need to go away and look at where people can best report just by a pin so we can target things at the right time? They're things we can look at for sure. It's a kind of, again, in line with other areas, there's an element of enforcement which is absolutely key, especially around e-bikes and especially in places where there's high footfall. It then comes into the legislation and the kind of education bit that we need to get right, because a lot of people we stop have no idea that it's illegal to drive an e-scooter around without, because it's got no insurance, it's got no anything. So to answer your question, yes, we do use tech, but in line with other answers, we could probably do it a bit better and get better at doing that.
Thank you, Chair. Claire kind of got there first, because I'm still concerned about, this is not criticism, by the way, it's a recognition of how difficult it is about your ability to do anything about, it tends to be young people on quad bikes. I've seen with my own eyes in my area, particularly, say, along Wolseley Road, what always appears to be quite young men, but actually not, maybe in balaclava, but no helmet, no high vis, literally driving with the centre line in the middle of their vehicle with no apparent regard whatsoever for oncoming traffic. And I know there is an issue about you do not want to give chase or even try to stop, because that then could cause another accident. So it's not clear to me what you can do about that. It seems like a very difficult challenge. So that is a question to you. Can I also support the idea of what the Chair said about going into schools? Children, by their very nature, obviously are very impressionable. For the police to go in and to create that very strong impression, I think is really, really important. And I'm going to do an oldie thing then and lament about the days and the way that I was brought up, that you automatically were told if you're in trouble, you need help, go to a police officer, look up to the police. And other thing I would also like to support is your strong presence in Rochester and Stroud. All the people I know, and I think in the vast majority of people who are law-abiding, actually do welcome seeing a strong police presence. And I get what you say about e-technology and resources, the rest of it, but just now and again, it's actually really, really just nice to see that physical, strong police presence. So thank you for that.
Well, we can talk specifically about what we do about operations. Perhaps we can come back with a more detailed report on that because I know time's tight, but we do use our special constabulary to do certain specific operations around road users in particular areas that have problems, and we do track them for problem management plans, but there are challenges, as you say, Councillor, in terms of how we address it, but we will continue to focus on those people and places where that is happening and do all we can, because there are things we can do. And I agree with you, technology's great, data's great, seeing a cop, being able to know that cop is and engage with them is absolutely vital, and that is not going to change anytime soon.
You, Habib and Mark, did you have your hand up again? Yeah, okay. And then after Mark Barnes has spoken, I'm going to close the item and take, sorry, Stephen, sorry. I'm looking at Mark's next to you there. And just take a short break, because I think this has been a very complex item. Okay, so Habib and then Stephen, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one, following up on the use of technology. Do you think that live facial recognition will reduce or could potentially reduce road or improve road safety? And if so, is there a potential that will be coming to Medway anytime soon?
So facial recognition is a national issue, and there's national committees and processes and procedures are in place for that. I know that the police service has looked at it elsewhere, and I know there's all manner of complex political and social issues around the state and focusing on people. So I don't know of specific plans in relation to facial recognition in Medway outside of what's already been reported in the media, but I think it's incumbent on police to do what we can to use technology in the right way, and certainly will be guided by the law and authorities, and the Home Office will lead on that, no doubt. So that's where I'd go with that one.
I'm afraid, in my view, if you've done nothing wrong, you've got nothing to fear from facial recognition technology. Stephen, please.
It's quite significant numbers with the big four factors and people that are getting arrested for drug and alcohol-related driving offences. From police, we get a really large quantity of referrals for the drug test and arrest scheme and through the Criminal Justice Liaison Diversionary Service. What are the internal mechanisms within Kent Police for educating people that are caught drink or drug driving and actually connecting with the correct support? Would that come through the CJLDS scheme?
Yeah, that would do, and it's run centrally by tactical operations and our criminal justice units that take that up, but there is a focus on that, and certainly that education part is absolutely critical, as you say.
I'm glad Stephen's raised that, because I think drug driving is, emerging as a bigger issue than people believe it is, including drug users. Casual use of these drugs. People think that it doesn't have any impact on what they're doing, but I'm afraid it does. And I think as part of our joint work through the Combating Drugs Partnership, that needs to be a strong element, particularly with the work you're doing with the young people as part of the open road in Chatham High Street. There may be, an opportunity to work together on that and perhaps come and do a presentation to get people to understand that, taking these illegal but casually used drugs does have a very direct impact on your ability to drive safely. Okay, everybody. Well, I think we can thank Gary and Paul very much for two really full parts of the report and for answering our questions. We've got some actions to take away that I think will be useful, and we'll continue to keep an eye on this particular element of the strategy, because obviously, as you very frankly said, it's not where we would want it to be, and the preventative measures that we can take to get it to where we want it to be, I think are going to be important now and in the future. You're very welcome to stay. We've got two more items. Just going to take a quick break if anyone wants a drink or a snack, and come back in 5 minutes. Okay? Thank you very much. start then the next part of the meeting, the Climate Change Action Plan. Very pleased we've got Vicky Emmerich here today. This has been through Cabinet recently. It's the third iteration of the plan, so it's going from strength to strength. I'm very pleased to say that along with Scott, we were talking to Sir Michael Marmot about the fact that we've got this plan, and I think it's fair to say, isn't it, Scott, that he was impressed with that we, are not just it's something that has been a focus of the Council for quite a long time, and of our consciousness always that those with the lightest footprint and the greatest deprivation are most affected by when things go wrong. So with that, Vicky, I'll ask you to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. Pleased to be here to present a brief update on the refreshed Climate Change Action Plan, which covers the period 2025 to 2028. As you said, it was adopted by Cabinet last week. It's the third version of the plan since the Council declared a climate emergency back in 2019. And we've made really good progress over the last 6 years. Some of those key achievements are documented within the action plan. And both council emissions and Medway area-wide emissions have reduced by over 30% since 2018. So the refresh plan reflects the council's evolving approach to climate action. It aligns really closely with the One Medway Council plan and obviously with the joint local health and wellbeing strategy. It sets out two overarching aims, one of those being to reduce carbon emissions by 2050 and to increase resilience against the impacts of climate change, both for Medway Council and for Medway as a place. The plan is structured around 5 priority areas, which Councillor Curry actually developed initially, had some early conversations with his communities. They include knowledge and empowerment, clean, efficient and equitable energy, sustainable transport, resource efficiency and a green and resilient Medway. And it's no coincidence that we've got knowledge and empowerment at the top of that list and it's got the most actions against it. It's really important for us that our communities understand how they will be impacted by climate change, where they can go to seek advice and guidance, that they know what the council's role is and what we're doing and we're transparent about that, and that they know what actions they can take, whether that's individually or collectively. And also to understand what the wider benefits of taking action are to them. Quite often saying to somebody about reducing their carbon footprint isn't the hook, it's going to be, saving money on bills, that kind of thing. So we know that climate change will affect everyone, is affecting everybody, but it's not equally across, all of our communities. Vulnerable groups, including those with health conditions, so health conditions, older adults and children, will face disproportionate risks. For this reason, actions to reduce health inequalities and improve outcomes for our communities are a key consideration both within the action plan and the accompanying comms engagement strategy, and we have a refreshed one of those each year. And clearly, as you said, it really supports that work that we're doing around our Marmotplace ambitions as well. So by working across all of our communities and collectively with our partners, we can really amplify those health and wellbeing benefits, and that's something that we're going to be, hoping that we can explore today. Cleaner air, warmer homes, and more connected communities, to name but a few. So we're inviting you and the organisations that you represent to consider how you can work in partnership with us and with each other to support the aspirations of the plan, whether that's through knowledge sharing, community engagement, infrastructure, or service delivery. So we welcome your feedback and ideas on how your represented organisations can play your part. I know if Councillor Curry was here, he would be requesting that this is an opportunity to really kind of make those connections with each other and discuss how you can contribute to bringing the plan to life, to make sure it's not only effective but inclusive, empowering and health enhancing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vicky. And I think, it was unfortunate that Simon couldn't be here today. There's just been such a lot going on with the local plan and other things that he's had to pay attention to. Absolutely, he would be saying that. And one of the things that he said at Cabinet, which I think we all felt very good about, was that for the first time, he can see a net zero Medway, that there's sufficient progress has been made, sufficient actions are in place to actually make that happen, even before the target, actually. I think he's quite optimistic, and the way that the things that relate to health interconnect, like active travel, like all of the things that we do in public health with our making the best use of our green spaces to run and organise the health walks. Very nice yesterday in the Make a Difference Awards to see Mark Greenstreet's work recognised, I think, as somebody who's a fantastic supporter for the community when people want to get things going. And, you know, it's been said to me many times when I've joined health walks that the work of Mark and his colleagues make them feel safe, make them feel that the walk will do them good and that they can make a regular habit of it. So it was nice to see his work recognised yesterday. So absolutely with that, anything that we can contribute, Vicky is pleased to hear, and any comments on any of the targets and aspirations would be welcome, please.
Well, I think MVA are happy to kick things off in terms of commitment. So I noted that in the report, it mentions MVA being part of the sort of the engagement. And I think the reason why we were there was because we'd done a campaign through the voluntary and community sector around being greener. So absolutely commitment. I think what would be really helpful in terms of helping this become a real movement are two things really. One is a bit of a toolkit. So when we were putting together our campaign, what we're conscious of, there's a lot of resources and guidance for if you've got money and you sort of big things that you can do. So a real focus on the small things that don't cost a lot of money or resource or capacity, because the sector just doesn't have that. However, they'll be keen for two reasons. One, it's really good for society, but secondly, it really helps in terms of sort of funding and bringing in that much sort of more coordinated approach across the system. And then the second thing that would be really helpful is putting, again, within the sector, putting things in their hands that they can be talking to their service users, their communities about. So that education side of things, I think, would be put things in people's hands that are nice and accessible. That would really help.
I'm going to ask Scott to come in before you come back, Vicky, please.
It was kind of a question for Claire really around the MVA role. Obviously, you know, from an infrastructure body perspective, it's about increasing our voluntary sector capacity. And I'm just wondering what the makeup of our 1,000+ community sector groups is in relation, how many of our charities, voluntary sector groups have a charitable objective around the climate specifically. We all have a role. Every public, private, you know, education sector body have a role. And then maybe, is it possible to do a bit of comparison how that compares to neighbourhoods? So just in case we haven't got, you know, whether you're focused on animal charities or caries, you know, and are we missing that in Medway? Because, you know, the role that Vicky and Bob's team do, you know, we're just one partner, but getting some really good charities with particular focus around climate change, biodiversity would be really imperative. Or do we already have a well-stocked team and it's just about supporting them better? So it's a kind of double question back.
Okay, so questions to you, Claire, before Vicky comes back with answers to you.
So we haven't done a full audit, and I think that's possibly we can go out. It's been a little while since we've gone out and pestered them with a poll, so we can absolutely do that around who has a policy or a statement around environment. My guess would be that quite a lot will, because it's often a requirement of funding. But in terms of when we were putting together the campaign, there were some really good case studies around examples, because the sector was sharing good examples, and perhaps we can do more of that to support kind of this bigger piece.
Thank you. So we have rolled out campaigns before ourselves as well around small changes, so small actions that people can take. But perhaps you're alluding more to things that are specific to the sector. So perhaps we can pick that up after today's meeting to address how we can support you with that. We do put resources out on our website. We've got social media platforms which we encourage all of our sort of partners and networks to follow. And in terms of putting, again, resources into their hands, if there's sort of specific things that you think they would be looking for, then we can work with you to see how we might be able to support that. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Morty next, then Matt, then Eddie, and then Mark, you.
Thank you for really comprehensive report. I just wondered that if you were aware of NHS's commitment of net zero as well, and the links that you have with the ICB. If not, then I can again make sure that there are links, introduce you to the link in the ICB.
Thank you. Yeah, so fully aware of it and very well connected with the NHS Green Lead and also connected in with the Kent and Medway ICS sustainability meetings that they have every quarter. Thank you.
Matt?
Yes, on a similar theme, I note on page 33 of your report, 81, I think, of the pack, there is a supporting strategies piece, and as you probably know, and we're obviously a big employer and a big part of Medway, the hospital it always just literally taking its revised green plan through its governance processes at the moment. But obviously we've just been awarded a very large grant to decarbonise our estate, which will obviously go a long way towards this. But I think there's probably synergies in here that I think we might be able to draw out a bit more, so we could deliver a little bit quicker on some stuff and maybe work a bit more harmoniously rather than sort of us just being a stakeholder. Actually, we might be able to jointly deliver on some of this stuff. So perhaps outside of this, we'll have a bit of a chat about that.
I'm sure you'd be happy to facilitate that. Vicky, Bob, were you coming back on that particular point? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. One of the things that we're keen to do as we refresh our communications plan is to pick up on where work across Medway is being done, so it doesn't just become the council reporting on what it's doing. So if we can pick that up, that would be a fantastic one to add into. Thank you.
And I think just on that, I mean, Matt's quite right. It is a significant grant. We had a look at it at the trust governors, and there was a bit of noise from people saying, well, why is that a priority when we've got other priorities? But I think what's really important is, and through any resources that we can use to support that, is the fact that actually it will make a difference to patients, to practice, to the hospital's ability to deliver their targets. And I think, generally speaking, at the governor's meeting, we were successful in getting that bit of conviction. But it's a commonly held view, and we need to dispel some of those myths, actually, around them. Okay, thank you, Bob, for that. Eddie?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, when it comes to spelling myths, unfortunately, there still are some political groups that try to say that climate change is still a myth. And I think it's really, the message is really, really important. So actually, I'm saying it's a statement. I was going to ask you, Vicky, as a question. Do you think, right, so I'm going from a tangent now. Despite what's in the report about all the engagement with the different teams, obviously doing a really, really good job. But there still seems to be a case to the wider public about, do you agree there's a case with the wider public that there's still maybe not enough appreciation of the negative impact of climate change, and especially thinking from our point of view on the elderly and the vulnerable, so that is a question. And the other thing was, following from what Claire said, and I must admit, I just looked it up because I forgot the name. Back in May at the Corn Exchange, Casualties was there, remember that? We were at the Climate Business Sustainable Strategies Conference, so climate and business came along. And I found that really encouraging because it did show you how much the business community, how many businesses were willing to put their own money, resources, time and effort into dealing with issues to do with the climate. So, you know, I hate it when people got prejudice against the business world or whatever, because they are a resource that we should tap into. They want to be tapped into. And I can see already you've got that relationship. But I think he's already been asked. He asked about how it's already been developed. So I can't really say that's a question. I'm saying it more as a statement of support. Thank you.
Thank you. So we run annual surveys actually to try to understand our community's views on climate change, how aware they are of what the council is doing, and even sort of to understand if there's an appreciation for their personal kind of responsibility. And across the board, it has increased, which is positive. And when we're out and about at events as well, I can definitely see there's sort of been a turn in that people are coming to us to say, well, I've done this to my property, for example, but what's the next step and what's available to me? And even likewise with businesses, that was reflected in our conversations with businesses from one event to the next year. You could see that, yeah, organisations, they're already doing it. They're aware of what the challenges are. And actually, increasingly, people don't want to hold on to that information for themselves. They're happy to share. So that's our role as a council, is to kind of connect people. The case studies comes into it as well, sharing what others are doing. Yeah, I think there has been a shift, definitely.
you. Bob's just coming in with a response for you, Eddie, before you come back.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think undoubtedly there will always be some people who are negative about this. That's accept that. I think Claire picked up on the really salient point, I think, is there's an awful lot of people out there who still aren't quite sure what they can do. And it's about understanding there's a big picture, but also understanding that smaller picture. And I think you touched on a really good point about the business engagement. We're absolutely, the event that we held earlier this year really showed that the businesses are getting that and starting to get that connectivity, and the work that Vicky and the team have done in spreading that message is key. And that's why, going back to how the report is, how the action plan is structured, that whole knowledge section is the first section, because it is about how do we continue that communication to get people to understand where they can get involved in this.
And I think that's critical, Bob, and Jackie, Leanne, yeah. The renewed emphasis on telling people about the small benefits to them, I think, because, you know, following on from Eddie's point, climate change denial is often based on an idea that somehow it's preventing people from doing something, you know, trying to get them out of their car, you know, trying to stop them doing something that they enjoy, rather than actually, you know, reaping benefits for them. So I think anything that we can do to push and promote that is important. But Mark Jones and then Leanne, please.
Yeah, just a quick comment and then a question from me. Thank you, Chair. I certainly agree with what you were saying earlier and reflecting Councillor Curry's comments at Cabinet that we ought not to see the 31st of December 2050 as a date on a piece of paper. We and our partners ought to be getting on with this now and be looking to get to net zero sooner if we at all can. My comment was going to be on housing. My question was going to be on that as well. In terms of housing, of course, one of our key partners are the housing associations, and it's important that we work with them, prompt them to get on with some of the sort of energy saving, energy efficiency measures which need to be done in properties in Medway, not only in new build but in older properties, because there are so many of them in Medway. Anything we can do at all to promote energy efficiency. And in connection with that, I was looking at paragraph 4.3 and I was wondering what support we are giving to homeowners in terms of making their homes more energy efficient. In view of the time getting on, I'm quite happy to accept a briefing note on that if it would be more helpful, Chair.
You know, we've got time. We've got two more items, but they're shorter, so go ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Jones. So there's a number of areas where we are either actively engaged in improvements to home insulation. The one being the National Warm Homes Local Grant, where we've got awarded circa 1.5 million. That obviously is targeted particularly at people under an income threshold in particular areas of Medway. There are other schemes that Vicky and the team have been working on for a longer time, such as Solar Together, which is about trying to make it more energy efficient. But we recognise there's a big group. We have a large older housing stock that we need to look at. How do we ensure that there are opportunities there for them to engage in improvements to their properties? And a piece of work that we're doing for the Climate Oversight and Implementation Board is to assess what is out there currently, you know, what can we benchmark against, to then identify where there may be opportunities in the future to do some more targeted work that will assist homeowners to improve the insulation of their homes.
Thank you, Bob. Leanne, please.
Thank you. I think this is you know, really good, because there's absolute links with health and wellbeing in here, but I'm not sure, building on Claire's point, I'm not sure we're always as focused on that as we could be. There is, and I see this quite a lot, we somehow as a human race think that we can tame or control climate, and any of us who have been caught in the torrential downpours in the last couple of days know that isn't true. But when we look at some of these actions, I think it would do us well to link it to that health and well-being, because people understand that agenda. It's probably not as, well, you know, this is debatable, but it's not as contentious, I guess, as climate change can be. So I'm thinking other examples, driving into Medway this morning on roads that I never see very many people walking. I saw a whole lot today putting their rubbish out, and it did cross my mind, gosh, there's a lot of exercise going on there. People putting their rubbish out, but you know, they'd probably sorted it into recycling or whatever, and they're doing something else on top. So I think in terms of the Health and Wellbeing Board, we could do well to be champions for this, because if anybody comes to the Health and Wellbeing Board and thinks that their agenda item has got nothing to do with climate change, then I would say it would be incumbent upon us to help them realise how that fits in with this plan, Chair, because there are lots and lots of different hooks within this that everyone can relate to, children right through to our elderly population, I would suggest. So thank you, Chair.
Part of that, making every action count towards something. Again, you know, emphasising, as Leanne's suggesting to people, that by their very actions, they're doing two things. They're helping us reduce our carbon footprint and helping themselves by getting more active. So I think, you know, what lots of these are, Vicky, are ideas for emphasis in your communications about the plan, aren't they? Which is helpful. Anybody else on this item, please, before we move to the pharmaceutical needs? Scott.
It was a follow-up question, really, for NHS colleagues, really. Obviously, I was looking at the NHS blueprint suggesting that ICB's responsibility for climate and sustainability would be shifting to providers. There is a, you know, Kent and Medway ICS sustainability meeting, climate meeting that, you know, Vicky and I regularly attend anyway, so we are part of that group and that connection, and Vicky does a great job sharing with Ali Watson beforehand around active travel programs. We work well with MFT, but it's just reaffirming that point really around, you know, key members. If the ICB is, you know, changing the, obviously it's changed, it's got its own challenges around capacity, how is it going to kind of maintain that? We get the kind of green net zero aspiration for the NHS, which is fantastic. I know it's going to be, you know, responsibility for providers, but how the ICB kind of making sure that there's that middle ground by saying, let's see that commitment right through from providers, if it's not going to be their responsibility.
Take that. Thank you, Scott, for raising that. It's all work in progress for us, so it's at this point in time, it's very difficult for me to give specific answers. But the point that it's the net zero commitment of the NHS, and it's at the level of where the services are provided, and from the example that Matt has said, you know, that commitment is there at provider level. So from the ICB, your question is specifically to the ICB side of things. These things obviously is in the blueprint, and from the ICB perspective, it's all work in progress, so no specific answers can be given at this stage, really.
Thank you, Morty, and I think we understand the kind of vagaries of the reorganisation and the efficiencies that you're making. One thing I think we could do, Scott, as a very clear action, is put that question on our next ICP meeting, which will go ahead on the 6th of October, because we probably haven't run that through partners in terms of commitment, and now we've had the iteration of the Climate Change Action Plan. It would be a good opportunity to share it, actually.
And it is such a good group to be part of, that Kent and Medway group. You know, there's so much linkage between the transport links across that. So it is one of those ones which I think from a Kent and Medway response, it's so important because, you know, climate doesn't understand the M2 natural border, you know, it moves across. So it's a real group that not working with all of our system partners in the NHS is just non-common sense.
Yeah, I mean, it looks as if it will fall to Medway to organise that meeting anyway, so if we can have that as an action, Steph, and work with relevant people. And Multi, anything that, you know, any news and updates in terms of responsibility and changes are very welcome at any time. You don't have to wait for a meeting. Okay, anybody else before we close this item? Thank you very much, Vicky and Bob, for your contributions on something that I think we can be justifiably proud of. And I hope that from this board's point of view, you can see there's a lot of support for those aspirations in lots of different ways. Okay, I'm going to, yes, we ought to, yes, so Steph's quite reminded me, I didn't do this last time, but perhaps it wasn't so important with the police. Yeah, I'm just asking you to note the report and the information provided in the presentations and accept the fact that we have considered how we can amplify the benefits of climate change across health and well-being. Is that okay, everybody? Okay, thank you. Yeah, you're a bit late on that agreement, Mark. You're normally, you know, ahead of... actually, that's too early and too late that time, yeah. A huge level of inconsistency there, but anyway.
On average.
Yeah, as David said, yeah, a good average. Right. So thank you, David. Now, just to remind everybody, this has been through a public consultation. We've had a steering group. We had a consultant running this statutory needs assessment for us. There has been an opportunity to comment on the survey itself and the recommendations. And before anybody else says it, we acknowledge, absolutely, that provision across Medway isn't consistent, but we have to, in looking and accepting what this report is saying, understand that the pharmaceutical providers themselves need to be in a situation where their practice is viable. So whilst there is a shortage of pharmacies on the peninsula, I'm in no doubt of that, the population does not at this time support viability. Similarly, we've had quite a lot of comment, although not in the survey, but outside of the survey and through scrutiny from people in Rainham who feel that provision isn't adequate for their needs, but on the basis of the scale and standards that we had to work to, the provision is adequate. Anyway, I'm going to pass very quickly to David for introducing the report to us, please. And we are being asked to approve the assessment, but it has been through all of the statutory steps that it needs to get to this point. Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Yes, so the pharmaceutical needs assessment is a statutory duty for health and wellbeing boards to deliver every 3 years. There is a sort of very prescribed process that needs to be followed, and we sought external support for this. The P&A tells us what pharmaceutical services are currently available and where there are likely to be changes in the future over the life of the P&A, so over the next 3 years. The provision of NHS pharmacy services is a controlled market, so you can't just set up a pharmacy if you want to. You have to apply, and NHS then has to consider whether it's appropriate to allow a pharmacy to open in a particular area based on the need. And any application must prove that they meet the pharmaceutical need. NHS England relies on P&As to inform their decision making, as I've just described. It's important to note that the P&A is not an assessment of the quality of services. There's separate routes for that. So quality of pharmaceutical service provision is out of scope for the P&A. And it's important to note that there are national community pharmacy workforce challenges and financial pressures. The rate of store closures in 2024 was higher than in previous years, and mainly due to a combination of funding and workforce challenges. And a recent report commissioned by NHS England found that 47% of pharmacies were not profitable in the last accounting year. So if pharmacies are not profitable, they are going to close. So if you have too many pharmacies in one particular area, it potentially puts them all at risk. Therefore, yes, market stability is very much a concern. As Councillor Murray said, there was a steering committee that led the process in developing this P&A, and we had external consultants leading on that for us. And the report has been to HASC. There's been public consultation. At HASC, there were robust challenges. One of the things that I've taken away from HASC is that the way that the P&A is written is very much for the benefit of the NHS, and it's not a very user-friendly, public-friendly document. So we've been working since HASC on developing a shorter, more concise, easier to read summary of the P&A that we hope to make available very, very soon, but it wasn't ready in time to be distributed with papers for this meeting. That's really it. I think those are the key things I want to say about the P&A. So you have the document there, and I'm happy to take any questions on it.
Before I ask for questions, absolutely endorse everything that David said. At paragraph 4.3.5, the idea that pharmacy inadequacy or poor performance could be addressed through the P&A, it couldn't. The right place to address that through is the commissioners. But what I would say is we had very low take-up from providers, actually, very low. Not terribly lower than anybody else, according to our consultant who said it was always a difficulty. But I think going forward, because this is a statutory process that takes place every 3 years, we might need to think about how we better engage with pharmacies. They have been represented when we've had the joint health and wellbeing strategy meetings, and they have definitely had things to say. But if we're collectively serious with NHS partners about making pharmacies part of the offer, to try to take pressure off the emergency department and off GP services, I think there is scope for us to engage better. And with the board's consent, I think I'd like to try to set up a meeting that at least considers that with some of the representatives from our local pharmacy sector, because even doing some direct engagement to try to get them to respond to the survey, I did feel that there's a sense of disconnection, that they don't feel in the wider system that their views are heard, and yet we have got an expectation that they will immediately take on, for example, the 7 conditions that they were expected to through the winter last year. We're about to go into the vaccination season. We're an under-vaccinated population in the UK and in Medway particularly, and we rely on pharmacy partners to help us improve that. So I think with the board's consent, the time is right to have a separate meeting to get their views and ideas. If there's no dissent on that, I'll take it as an action and go ahead with it. Okay. Any questions on that? Or
You'd be glad to know, it's just a quick one, and forgive my ignorance. Does the pharmaceutical industry, does it have a body that gives voice to them? Do they have any kind of organisation that can, okay, thank you. And they are?
They have 2. There's one for the retail side and there's one for them as pharmacists. So they have 2 bodies that they sort of work with, and then obviously they work under an NHS contract.
Hopefully that helps.
and they do have their own regulator, actually. So that's...
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, and I certainly support the idea of a meeting. If we look at the report in terms of the peninsula and our rural areas, for example, as you said in your introductory remarks to the item, page 104 and 224 in our paperwork, you know, it first of all says that pharmacy contractors need to flex their capacity in response to local needs, and yet it appears that none of the pharmacies in the peninsula are open on a Sunday. So maybe that's the sort of thing that could be explored at a meeting as to how they might flex their capacity to meet local needs. The report also explains that people can get to a pharmacy quite easily on the peninsula by driving, or at least the majority of people are close to a pharmacy by driving there. Of course, this is slightly contrary to our previous item on climate change, and I certainly think we need to be looking to improve public transport, even if we can't improve the number of pharmacies, so that people can get to pharmacies more easily. My point really was something that doesn't just apply to the peninsula, but is littered, if you like, throughout this report. It says in the paperwork, although it may take longer for some residents in the more rural areas to get to a pharmacy, this would be no different from accessing other usual healthcare services or out-of-hours services in person. Well, surely the total point of having a pharmacy service is that people don't have to access out-of-hours services or out-of-hours GP services. They've got a pharmacy that they can go to. So to say in the report, as it does quite frequently, you know, this is no worse than other out-of-hours services, I think is missing the point a little bit, if I may say. Thank you.
To come back on that when we've heard from Habib. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, I was telling you. Now, just a comment before I pose my question. I mean, for most people, the pharmacy is not just where you go to get drugs. You know, it's a community hub. It does a lot more than that. You know, in terms of frontline being a hub to identify new issues. So, I mean, I'm new to this. Well, I don't sit on this committee, I guess, yes. So perhaps this is covered. But I looked through the report briefly when I knew I was coming before, and I couldn't find or couldn't have an answer to my question in terms of how is the PNA ensuring that is actually has ensuring that, you know, vulnerable communities are not left out. I couldn't see that in there. How does it ensure that? What's got my notes there? Yeah, we don't. I mean, we're not leaving out our most vulnerable voice, deprived community, and you know, I just couldn't get that from the report, and probably missed it. So perhaps, you know, maybe you could point me into the right direction where I could be more confident in how this is addressing health inequality and access, in particular to vulnerable residents.
Thank you, David. So you've got two things to respond to there. Mark's question on whether there's a sort of corporate honesty, I suppose, about access, and then Habib further with vulnerable communities.
Right, thank you. Yes, so you're absolutely right. We are keen to try to alleviate pressure on other parts of the system by promoting pharmacy first. Ultimately, it still comes back to the original issue that in terms of the sort of pharmaceutical need, we need to deliver the P&A according to the rules that are set for how P&As need to be written. And that's based around the core hours of availability and then looking at access to the pharmacies during those core hours. So we could perhaps have phrased that bit a little bit differently. You're absolutely right. But ultimately, it doesn't change the way that we can make the assessment on the pharmaceutical need. And then coming to Councillor Tejan's point about vulnerable groups, again, that's not explicitly part of what the P&A is designed to cover. It is actually quite an important angle, and I think it's something that we will take away for the next revision of the P&A, because I think it would be good for us to look at it from that particular angle. But I suspect in this case it's not going to change the assessment of pharmaceutical need across Medway and across the areas of Medway. And as I say, the way that services are delivered is not something that is formally part of the P&A assessment.
Okay, so that's for both of your questions. You know, they're important questions in their own right. But for the P&A, we were working within a particular framework that does that. You know, those things sit outside of that framework. Now, the extent to which they're included, we can recommend and feed up, but it doesn't stop us having a look at those issues, which is why I'm suggesting that having a meeting is probably timely and a good idea. What I can say is that the ICB are commissioning a mobile facility with the idea of concentrating initially on vaccination in areas where take-up rates are poor, and but with the possibility of also extending the health checks and other services. So that is actually happening. One of the pharmacies in Rochester have got a vehicle in place that's been approved by the ICB, a contract has been approved. It's the logistics now of where it might go and what it might do. So as far as I'm concerned, that's a step forward in terms of getting the vaccinations, particularly because, you know, vaccinations often in themselves stop people getting ill, but they don't stop just the people who have been vaccinated getting ill. They stop all the other people who they are in contact with getting ill. And as we've seen with measles, when there's a drop-off, we start to see the rise of disease, and that is precisely what happened over the winter with flu. There were too few people who'd been vaccinated and too many people who then were either infected, and if they were vulnerable, they were filling up the hospital. And if they hadn't been infected, other groups of people, because the strain of flu we saw last year was quite strong and debilitating, were also going to hospital. So it's about trying to get in front of that, and the council is going to have a big campaign as well, encouraging people to have the flu vaccination. So we are sort of fighting on every front in this prevention agenda. And the under-vaccinated areas will tend to be more vulnerable communities or hard-to-reach communities, or communities where there is a high amount of vaccine scepticism. So I think, you know, the ICB are playing their part in understanding that there needs to be spend on covering that, but the general case for vulnerable communities accessing pharmacies is a point well made, and something that the outside of the P&A it doesn't stop us doing. You know, we don't write it, we're statutory obliged to do it to be. So we have to work within the standards and constraints of that assessment. Okay. Anybody else? Right, we're going to move quickly to the work programme then, please, Stephanie. Happy to agree, before we do, the pharmaceutical needs assessment. Okay, so we're approving it as it stands, although it's already been through the statutory provision, with the comments and additions. Is that okay with everybody? Thank you. Okay, step on to the work programme.
I don't really have anything to add. I will just take it as read and happy to take questions. But just on reflection, I think that there's something I need to do to evidence actions and progress that's been made with actions. So I would like to suggest if the board is in agreement, that going forward I include a small table on the work programme that kind of shows the evidences, the actions that, you know, we're supposed to be taking and where progress has been made against them.
Yeah, I think that's a very good idea. We've tended to feed back directly to the board in briefing notes and letters before, but actually encapsulating that on the work programme I think would be a really good idea. So thank you for that, Stephanie. And remember, the work programme is formulated when we have the pre-agenda, so a lot of discussion and consultation goes into it. And any member of the board, as I was saying to Claire earlier, we were talking about something, is entitled to come and ask us to include something on the work programme. So, okay. Right, with that, thank you very much. If we're happy with the recommendations from the work programme, with that addition from Stephanie, no dissent, I'll thank you very much for coming to what's been, I think, an interesting meeting as always. Today, your last meeting, Jane, we will miss you. We wish you very well. I've just been hearing about Jane's holiday arrangements with a degree of envy for next week. But, you know, once again, thank you very much for your contribution and for your determination to ensure that the voluntary and community sector have had a voice here. Okay, thank you, everyone.